On the morning of June 2, 2022, 39-year-old Stephen Dirks reported for his shift at Caterpillar's Foundry in Mapleton, Illinois. He had been on the job just 9 days, still learning the ropes at a facility that produces cast-iron engine components for construction and mining equipment, diesel engines, and industrial machinery. The plant's melt floor was dominated by massive open pots of molten iron, each holding thousands of pounds of liquid metal heated to over 2,000 degrees, roughly twice the temperature of volcanic lava. The heat radiating from the pots was intense. Workers on the platform felt it immediately on their faces and arms as they moved across the floor. The metal glowed a deep orange, shimmering like liquid fire, and flowed with a mesmerizing yet deadly fluidity. For most, these conditions were routine, but every step near the edge carried a lethal risk. Stephen's task that morning was a standard one, taking a sample of the molten iron before it was poured into molds. He carried his tools onto the platform and approached the edge of one of the 11-foot deep pots. There were no guardrails or fall protection systems in place, a violation that would later be cited by OSHA. In the heat and focus of performing his job, Stephen slipped, falling into the molten iron. The fall was instantaneous. Co-workers could only watch as he was immediately incinerated by the extreme heat. At temperatures above 2000 degrees, survival was impossible even for a single second. The molten iron swallowed him completely, leaving no time to grab anything or attempt a rescue. Work on the foundry floor stopped immediately. First responders arrived within minutes, but there was nothing to save. The pot had to be left to cool before anyone could approach, a grim reminder of the power of the molten metal. In the aftermath, federal safety investigators from OSHA determined that the foundry routinely exposed employees to unprotected fall hazards, especially those working within just 4 feet of deep ceramic containers of molten iron. The agency concluded that if proper guardrails or restraint systems had been in place, Stephen's life might have been spared. Caterpillar was cited for one willful safety violation and fined $145,27. Stephen's death was not only a catastrophic accident, but a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in industrial work. The plant employs over 800 people. Yet, even a Fortune 500 company with vast resources failed to provide basic fall protection in one of the most hazardous areas of the foundry. Stephen Dirks left behind 3 children, a family forever changed by a tragedy that could have been prevented. His story serves as a chilling warning. In industrial settings, even a routine task performed in a moment of carelessness or oversight can turn instantly fatal. The molten iron he fell into was unforgiving, and the consequences of inadequate safety measures were irreversible. It was just after 9:30 p.m. on a Sunday evening at Tina's Burritos factory in Vernon, California, a small industrial city just a few miles from Los Angeles. The factory, known for producing nearly 1 million frozen burritos each day, was humming with activity as employees prepared for the next day's production run. Workers hustled to clean, sanitize, and ready the massive machinery, unaware that the night would take a tragic turn. A 19-year-old sanitation worker, tasked with routine cleaning duties, was assigned to sanitize one of the plant's enormous meat kettles, a towering piece of equipment critical to the factory's daily output. What should have been a standard task quickly turned into a nightmare. Somehow, the young man became trapped inside the kettle. Despite the immediate response from co-workers and emergency personnel, he could not be saved and tragically passed away at the scene. Vernon police and city officials confirmed there were no signs of foul play, labeling it an industrial accident, though an ongoing investigation is underway with Cal OSHA and the district attorney's office to determine exactly how this could have happened. The accident sent shockwaves through the small factory community. Tina's Burritos released a statement expressing profound grief over the loss, emphasizing that the employee was performing routine cleaning tasks when the incident occurred. They highlighted the swift actions of colleagues and emergency responders and offered heartfelt condolences to his family, friends, and co-workers. City officials echoed these sentiments, calling the death heartbreaking and offering support to those affected. Investigators are now working to piece together what went wrong and how a tragedy like this might have been prevented. While accidents are unfortunately not uncommon in facilities that handle heavy machinery and large-scale food production, the death of such a young worker underscores the critical importance of strict safety measures and adherence to proper protocols. Tina's Burritos affirmed its commitment to cooperating fully with authorities and maintaining high safety standards across its facility. Factories like Tina's Burritos are high-pressure, high-demand environments. Employees work long hours handling enormous machines, heavy loads, and potentially hazardous materials, all while ensuring efficiency and speed in production. Despite the best intentions and routine safety procedures, incidents like this show how quickly ordinary work can become fatal when machinery, procedures, or circumstances fail. This tragedy also serves as a sobering reminder of the human cost behind the convenience of modern food production. Millions of people rely on fast packaged foods without ever seeing the complex and sometimes dangerous processes involved in making them. Workers like this young sanitation employee play a vital role in keeping production lines running, often performing repetitive, physically demanding, and high-risk tasks that the public rarely considers. As the community mourns, Tina's Burritos temporarily closed portions of its facility to focus on supporting employees and honoring the life of the young worker. The incident is a stark reminder of why workplace safety cannot be overlooked and how fragile life can be, even during what might seem like routine duties. It's a heartbreaking story, but one that compels us to acknowledge the people behind the products we take for granted and the systems in place to keep them safe. Ultimately, the death at Tina's Burritos is a tragic, sobering reminder that industrial workplaces, while essential to our daily lives, carry inherent risks. These environments demand constant vigilance, thorough training, strict adherence to safety protocols, and above all, respect for every worker's life and well-being. One moment of misfortune is all it takes for tragedy to strike. The Sawmill mine disaster of 2014 stands as one of the most devastating industrial tragedies in Turkey's history, a haunting reminder of how neglecting safety can turn a workplace into a graveyard. On May 13, 2014, in the mining town of Soma, Manisa province, what began as a regular day quickly spiraled into catastrophe. During a shift change, when both outgoing and incoming miners were underground, an explosion and subsequent fire tore through the tunnels. Within moments, the darkness filled with smoke, heat, and deadly carbon monoxide. The mine, normally bustling with the sounds of drills and machinery, fell silent as hundreds of workers were trapped deep beneath the earth, fighting for air that had turned toxic. Above ground, confusion turned to horror as news spread that something had gone terribly wrong. Families gathered outside the mine entrance, their faces pale with fear, waiting for updates that grew more heartbreaking by the hour. The rescue operation that followed was intense and dangerous, moving like the sea, and within minutes the pit became a mass grave. Rescue teams rushed in, but all they could find were helmets, sandals, and flashes of the green stones that had caused so much suffering. The tragedy did not come out of nowhere. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The jade mining industry in Hpakant is worth billions, but most of its profits never reach the miners themselves. Instead, the area is a chaotic patchwork of unregulated sites, enormous waste heaps, and dangerous working conditions. Companies dig deep, dump the leftover rubble into massive piles, and move on, leaving locals to pick through the remains. Add in the heavy monsoon rains, poor safety measures, and lack of government oversight, and you have a recipe for catastrophe. In fact, landslides in Hpakant are so common that locals have a grim saying, "When it rains, the mountains eat men." Sadly, the 2020 landslide proved just how literal that could be. After the disaster, rescue workers pulled out more than 160 bodies, while dozens more remained missing. The Myanmar Fire Service Department posted grim updates on Facebook as photos of the muddy devastation spread across the internet. Families gathered at the site, waiting for news that never came. Officials called it one of the worst mining accidents the country had ever seen. But for the people of Hpakant, it was another reminder that their lives were considered expendable in the pursuit of jade, a stone prized in luxury markets across the world. The Hpakant disaster was not just about nature's fury, it was about human greed and neglect. Experts later found that the slope had been dangerously unstable long before it collapsed, weakened by reckless dumping and rainwater infiltration. Locals had even warned authorities about the risk, but little was done. The government promised tighter regulations afterward, but with the jade trade being so lucrative and politically entangled, real change has been slow. In the end, the Hpakant landslide became a haunting symbol of Myanmar's jade industry, a world where fortune and fatality coexist side by side. Beneath the gleam of every polished green gemstone lies a story of struggle, sacrifice, and sometimes tragedy. Those who died in the 2020 disaster were not just victims of a landslide, they were victims of a system that buried them long before the earth did. It started as just another morning shift at the Bumble Foods plant in Santa Fe Springs, California. On October 11, 2012, Jose Milena, a 62-year-old employee who'd worked there for years, clocked in before dawn. He knew the routine like the back of his hand. Load the carts with tuna, slide them into the industrial ovens, seal them tight, and let the massive pressure cookers do their job. These weren't ordinary ovens. Each one stretched over 30 feet long, capable of holding thousands of cans at once. When sealed, the chamber filled with superheated steam, climbing to around 270 to cook the tuna perfectly. It was dangerous equipment, the kind of machinery that demanded strict safety measures and constant awareness. That morning, amid the noise of forklifts, rattling carts, and clanging metal, Jose stepped into the oven to check the carts he'd just loaded. Nobody saw him go in. On a busy floor with dozens of workers moving at once, his absence barely registered. A co-worker, assuming Jose had stepped away to the bathroom, closed the steel door, locked it, and started the cooking cycle. The oven sealed shut with a heavy clang. Steam began to pour through the pipes as the temperature climbed. Inside, Jose was trapped. Once the system was engaged, there was no manual release. It had to complete its full 2-hour cycle before it could be opened again. As the factory continued its routine, stacking pallets, running forklifts, and cycling ovens, no one realized Jose was missing. 2 hours later, when workers opened the oven expecting cooked tuna, they were met with a scene that would haunt them forever. Jose Milena had been inside the entire time. Deputy District Attorney Hoon Chun, a man who had prosecuted over 40 murder cases, later called it the worst circumstances of death I have ever witnessed. He added grimly, "If you had to choose a way to die, you'd rather be shot or stabbed than slowly cooked in an oven." The horrific tragedy sent shockwaves through California and drew the attention of state investigators and federal workplace safety officials. The California Division of Occupational Safety and Health concluded that Bumblebee Foods had failed to properly assess the dangers of working near those industrial ovens and lacked effective safety systems to prevent such a disaster. The company was initially fined $74,000, but that was only the beginning. Years later, after lengthy legal proceedings, Bumblebee Foods agreed to pay $6 million to settle criminal charges, the largest workplace death payout in California history. The settlement included $1.5 million directly to Milena's family, along with additional fines and a promise to overhaul factory safety nationwide. As part of the agreement, Bumblebee was required to upgrade its ovens so workers could never be trapped inside again and to implement new training programs focused on safety awareness. The company's plant operations director, Angel Rodriguez, and former safety manager Sol Flores were also charged. Flores, 42, pleaded guilty to a felony violation of workplace safety laws and received 3 years probation and nearly $19,000 in penalties. Rodriguez, 63, agreed to perform 320 hours of community service, take safety courses, and pay fines totaling around $11,000. In a public statement, Bumblebee said, "We will never forget the unfathomable loss of our colleague, Jose Milena, and we are committed to ensuring employee safety remains our top priority." But for those who knew Jose, no amount of money or corporate promises could erase what happened that morning. How an ordinary shift in a seafood plant turned into one of California's most horrifying industrial accidents, when a man was literally cooked to death in the same oven built to prepare tuna. Construction and industrial sites are dangerous, but some accidents go beyond what anyone could imagine. Just 9 days into his new job at Caterpillar's Foundry in Mapleton, Illinois, 39-year-old father of 3, Stephen Dierks, faced a nightmare no one could prepare for. On June the 2nd, he fell into an 11-foot-deep vat of molten iron and was instantly consumed by the searing heat. Molten iron at the foundry reaches nearly 2,600 joules, hotter than lava, and more than enough to destroy human flesh in an instant. For workers on the floor, a single misstep can be fatal. That day, Stephen's routine task turned into tragedy. He was working as a melt deck operator tasked with collecting a sample of molten iron. After spinning a massive wheel to pour the metal, he leaned over the vat. Somehow, he slipped. Witnesses described the scene as unimaginable. Emergency crews arrived almost immediately, but there was nothing they could do. Half of his body had already been consumed, and Stephen Dierks died on the spot. The incident stunned the plant, but unfortunately, it wasn't entirely unprecedented. Just a year earlier, in 2021, 50-year-old contractor Scott Adams also fell to his death at the same foundry. OSHA's investigation into Stephen's death concluded that if required safety guards or fall protection had been installed, the employee's 9th day on the job might not have been his last. OSHA also noted that workers were routinely exposed to unprotected fall hazards and proposed a fine of $145,000. Stephen's fiancée, Jessica Sutter, has been outspoken about the tragedy. "My children are left without their father. I am left without my fiancé, my partner, my best friend, all because they didn't take better safety precautions," she said. She also claims that Caterpillar offered no support, leaving her struggling to provide for her 2 daughters while dealing with the financial fallout. "As far as Caterpillar, I feel that they are murderers. It's a slaughterhouse. No one should have to lose their life like this," she added. Former and current employees paint a disturbing picture of life at the foundry. Workers report constant exposure to smoke, soot, and extreme heat that can exceed 120 degrees in summer months. Protective clothing offers only minimal defense against molten metal, and fall prevention measures are often inadequate or ignored. One worker explained that even leaning slightly over a melter to collect a sample was extremely dangerous, but employees were expected to do it anyway. The plant is split by the wall, dividing the machining area from the iron melting side, and employs over 800 people operating around the clock. Yet, safety protocols are inconsistent. Co-workers claim that after Stephen's death, Caterpillar only shut down operations for 2 days, reopening while the smell of burned flesh still lingered. In the absence of company support, employees even organized their own fundraiser for Stephen's family, as OSHA fines do not go directly to them. The tragedy at Mapleton is a harrowing reminder of how unforgiving industrial work can be. In environments with molten metal flowing beneath your feet, safety isn't optional. It's a matter of life and death. For Stephen Dierks, a routine task became fatal because protections that should have been in place simply weren't. Families, colleagues, and regulators continue to demand accountability, but the lesson is stark and clear. In these workplaces, one slip, one moment of distraction, and everything can change in an instant. Imagine it is 1942, deep in wartime China, where life above ground is already tense and below ground. It is a whole different world, filled with darkness, dust, and danger. Welcome to the Benxihu colliery, a massive coal mine in Liaoning province that was basically a ticking time bomb waiting for a spark. On April 26th, that spark finally came. One moment, miners were doing their usual backbreaking routine, hacking away at coal in the dim light. And the next, the entire underground world roared to life. A massive coal dust and gas explosion tore through the tunnels like a fiery dragon unleashed, turning an ordinary day at work into the deadliest mining disaster in human history. The explosion was so violent that it blasted debris out of the mine entrance, sending smoke and flames into the air. But the real horror was what happened afterward. The mine was under Japanese occupation during World War II, and the operators, fearing the spread of fire, decided to seal the mine shut with hundreds of workers still trapped inside. Imagine hearing the last thuds of rescue attempts fade away as the air turns thick with smoke. The lights go out and the temperature rises. It is the stuff of nightmares, but for over 1,000 men, it was a cruel reality. When rescuers finally reopened the mine days later, the scene was beyond tragic. A total of 1,549 miners were confirmed dead, most from suffocation and carbon monoxide poisoning rather than the blast itself. Many were found still clutching tools or wearing expressions frozen in terror. The disaster exposed not only the dangers of mining, but also the brutality of the working conditions at that time. Chinese miners were forced to work in inhumane circumstances with long hours, minimal safety measures, and constant pressure to produce more coal for the war effort. Safety checks were practically non-existent. Gas monitoring was ignored. It was all about output, and the cost of that obsession was paid in lives. The Japanese authorities initially tried to cover up the scale of the disaster, reporting far fewer deaths than the reality. But news spread quickly, and the horrifying number, over 1,500 dead, could not stay buried. When the bodies were finally brought out, they were so badly burned and charred that identification was nearly impossible. Mass graves were dug, and the cleanup became more about removing evidence than honoring the dead. For the survivors and families, there were no words, only grief, anger, and silence. In hindsight, the Benxihu disaster was not just about a gas explosion. It was about neglect, exploitation, and the human cost hidden behind industrial progress. The conditions that caused it were the result of reckless management, poor ventilation systems, and a total disregard for worker safety. Yet, out of this tragedy came a grim wake-up call. In the decades that followed, mining safety began to take center stage, at least in theory. Countries introduced stricter protocols, ventilation standards, and dust control systems to prevent such catastrophes. Unfortunately, history has a nasty habit of repeating itself, and smaller mining disasters have continued to echo Benxihu's deadly lesson even into the modern era. Today, the Benxihu colliery site stands as a somber reminder of what happens when profit is placed above humanity. No monuments, no grand memorials, only the quiet memory of 1,549 workers who never made it back to daylight. It is a chilling chapter in industrial history, but one that still resonates. So, the next time someone complains about a tough day at work, maybe remember that once upon a time, in a dusty mine in 1942, hundreds of men gave everything just to dig up coal. The least we can do is remember them, not with fear, but with respect, and perhaps a little awe for the price they paid in the dark. On the morning of February 27, 2013, 26-year-old Jorge Perez began his shift at Golden State Container, a packaging manufacturer in Los Angeles, California. The facility specialized in producing cardboard boxes and shipping materials, and its massive warehouse was dominated by towering industrial printing presses, enormous machines that stamped, cut, and printed designs onto large sheets of cardboard. Each press was a beast of metal in motion, as big as a truck, with heavy rollers and drums that pulled entire sheets of cardboard through at high speed. The air on the factory floor thundered with the constant pounding of machinery, the rhythmic hum of industry that workers had long since learned to tune out. Jorge was no stranger to the work. He had operated near these presses before. He understood their power, but like many who spend years around dangerous machines, the familiarity had dulled the fear. That morning, Jorge was assigned to one of the larger printing presses. It was running as usual, its rollers spinning non-stop, gripping and pressing cardboard with mechanical precision. Sometime during his shift, he stepped too close. In the blink of an eye, his clothing or hand must have caught in the moving rollers, and the machine pulled him in. The steady rhythm of the press suddenly changed. Nearby workers heard the difference immediately. A harsh grinding noise followed by shouts of panic. They turned to see Jorge trapped inside the machine. Co-workers rushed forward, slamming the emergency stop button, but the machine had already clamped down with immense force. Its rollers, designed to crush cardboard flat, now held Jorge's body in their grip. No one on the floor could free him. Within minutes, Los Angeles firefighters arrived and began the painstaking process of dismantling the printing press. The work was delicate and slow. They had to take the machine apart piece by piece to reach him without causing further harm. The rescue effort stretched on for nearly an hour as the crew used tools to pry apart the massive steel components. The factory floor, usually filled with the roar of machinery, was eerily silent. Workers stood at a distance, watching in disbelief as emergency crews fought to reach their co-worker. Some wept, others prayed, but everyone knew the truth. No one could survive what that machine had done. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, firefighters pulled Jorge free, but it was already too late. The rollers had crushed him beyond saving, and the coroner pronounced him dead at the scene. For those who worked alongside him, the shock was unbearable. One moment, Jorge had been performing a routine task, something he'd done countless times before, and the next, he was gone. The incident served as a brutal reminder of the hidden dangers of industrial machinery, where one moment of distraction or one missed precaution can mean the difference between life and death. In official reports, the tragedy was reduced to a few sterile words: employee caught in printing press and killed. But behind that line was the story of Jorge Perez, a young man in his 20s who went to work one morning and never made it home, crushed inside a machine built to shape cardboard, not to take a life. It was a regular afternoon at the Whitworth Sawmill in East Texas, the kind of day that should have been ordinary. The air buzzed with the grind of machines, smelled of fresh-cut pine, and radiated the heat of men working hard to keep the mill running. But inside, 4 workers were about to face a catastrophe that no one could have anticipated. Around noon, the men, Charles Richard Dick Whitworth, 33, co-owner of the mill, Reuben Anson Cox Jr., 31, and 2 Mexican nationals, Crescencio Leon and Ascension Farfan, both believed to be in their 30s, were struggling to clear a jammed wood chip machine. Like many mills, the Whitworth sawmill relied on massive steel cables wound around gears to manipulate and free heavy machinery. The men pulled and adjusted the cable, trying desperately to dislodge the blockage. But the cable, stretched taut like a bow, had stored dangerous energy. When it finally snapped, it whipped across the floor with the speed of a bullet and the force of a guillotine. All 4 men were struck immediately. Witnesses described the scene as incomprehensible. 4 bodies standing upright, but critically incomplete, decapitated in an instant. Sawdust, helmets, and the remnants of the men's lives were scattered across the floor. The 5th worker, who had been caught in the path but slightly off to the side, suffered a shattered leg but survived. EMTs arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do for the 4 men who had lost their lives. Sheriff Leon Fowler called it a bad scene, and Justice of the Peace Wanda Brasher confirmed the identities of the victims. The accident, like many workplace tragedies, highlighted a dangerous combination of human error, mechanical risk, and insufficient safety precautions. The Whitworth sawmill accident is a stark reminder of the risks that exist in industrial workplaces. Machines that grind, slice, and churn can be unforgiving, and even small miscalculations can become fatal. The workers at the mill, much like those in foundries, construction sites, and heavy industry across the country, face hazards that demand strict adherence to safety protocols. This story mirrors another tragic incident at Caterpillar's Mapleton, Illinois, Foundry, where 39-year-old father of 3, Stephen Dierkes, fell into an 11-foot-deep vat of molten iron on just his 9th day on the job. He was tasked with collecting a sample of molten iron, which reaches temperatures hotter than lava, over 2,600 degrees. After leaning over the vat to retrieve it, Dierkes slipped and partially fell in, instantly incinerated. OSHA later found that fall protection and safety guards were lacking and proposed a fine of $145,027. His fiancée, Jessica Sutter, condemned the company, saying her children were left fatherless because of inadequate safety measures. Both the sawmill and foundry tragedies reveal the deadly consequences when workers are exposed to extreme hazards without proper protections. At Whitworth Sawmill, a stretched cable acted with lethal speed. At Caterpillar, molten iron consumed a man in seconds. In each case, the workplace became a place where one misstep meant instant death, leaving families devastated and colleagues traumatized. Industrial work is inherently dangerous, but these accidents highlight how quickly routine tasks can turn deadly. From spinning cables to molten iron vats, the risks are unforgiving. Safety is not optional, it's survival. And when measures fail, the results are catastrophic, leaving behind grief, shock, and the haunting knowledge that, in these workplaces, one moment of carelessness or a missing guard can end a life in an instant. The Courrières mine disaster of 1906 stands as one of the darkest chapters in Europe's industrial history, a grim reminder of how progress often came at the expense of human lives. On the morning of March 10, 1906, in northern France's Courrières coalfield, over 1,700 miners descended into the depths of the earth, unaware that only about half of them would ever see daylight again. Moments later, a massive explosion, likely caused by coal dust igniting after a minor underground fire, ripped through the mine's tunnels. The blast was so violent it shattered equipment, collapsed galleries, and sent a wave of suffocating gas and debris racing through the shafts like a deadly storm. The explosion instantly killed hundreds, but the true horror unfolded in the hours that followed. The air underground became a toxic mix of smoke and gas, and survivors stumbled blindly through the darkness, gasping for air as they searched for an escape that no longer existed. Above ground, chaos reigned. Families rushed to the mine's entrance, desperate for news of loved ones. The blackened faces of rescuers emerging from the tunnels told them all they needed to know. It was a scene of heartbreak and disbelief, one that would haunt the mining communities of northern France for generations. The death toll reached an estimated 1,099 miners, making it Europe's worst mining disaster. Among the victims were children as young as 10, who had been working alongside their fathers in the dangerous, cramped tunnels. The scale of the tragedy shocked not just France, but the entire continent. In an era when industrial safety was often treated as an afterthought, the Courrières disaster exposed the brutal reality of the working class, the people whose sweat and lives fueled Europe's growing industries. Rescue operations began, but they were painfully slow. The mine company hesitated, fearing further explosions, and delayed sending rescue teams for days. This hesitation sparked outrage. As officials argued, volunteers and fellow miners took matters into their own hands, venturing into the deadly maze to pull out whoever might still be alive. Incredibly, 13 miners were found alive 20 days later, having survived in near darkness by eating horse meat and drinking filthy water. Their survival was hailed as miraculous, but it only highlighted the disastrous mismanagement of the initial rescue efforts. The aftermath was turbulent. Strikes erupted across France, fueled by anger at the government and mine owners who seemed more concerned about profits than human lives. The disaster became a powerful symbol of industrial neglect and a rallying cry for workers' rights. It forced authorities to confront the urgent need for stricter safety regulations, better ventilation systems, and humane working conditions underground. Today, more than a century later, the Courrières mine disaster remains a solemn reminder of the human cost of progress. The site stands as both a memorial and a warning, a tribute to the miners who perished, and a testament to the resilience of those who demanded change in the face of unimaginable loss. Beneath the quiet fields of northern France lie the echoes of that terrible morning in 1906, when the earth itself seemed to swallow a community whole, and the world learned a painful lesson about the price of industrial ambition. On the night of July 13, 2025, tragedy struck at the Tina's Burritos factory in Vernon, California, a facility known for mass-producing frozen burritos that stock grocery store freezers across the country. It was late, long after the day shift workers had gone home, and the sanitation crew was hard at work, cleaning and prepping the machinery for the next day's production run. Among them was a 19-year-old employee, a member of the overnight cleaning team. He'd only recently started working at the plant and had been assigned to sanitize one of the industrial meat grinders, sometimes referred to as a processing kettle, a massive steel machine roughly the size of a small car, equipped with powerful blades meant to grind meat and beans by the hundreds of pounds. Around 9:30 p.m., while cleaning the machine, something went horribly wrong. According to investigators, the grinder had not been completely powered down, a vital safety procedure known as lockout-tagout, which ensures machines cannot turn on during maintenance or cleaning. As the young worker leaned in to scrub the inside of the equipment, it suddenly roared to life. Within seconds, the routine hum of the factory turned into a scene of chaos. The worker's clothing became caught in the moving mechanism, pulling him forward before he had a chance to react. Co-workers nearby heard his screams for help and rushed to shut down the machine. They slammed the emergency stop button, but the grinder didn't halt in time. When Los Angeles County Fire Department paramedics and Vernon police officers arrived, the young man was already gone. He had been pulled completely into the machine and was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities later described the tragedy as a fatal industrial mishap. In a statement to the press, Tina's Burritos confirmed the devastating incident. "We are heartbroken to confirm that a sanitation worker lost his life on Sunday night, July 13th, 2025, while performing sanitation duties at our Vernon facility. He was cleaning an empty kettle that was being sanitized and prepped for the next day's production run. Despite the immediate response of co-workers and emergency personnel, he tragically passed away at the scene." The company added, "This is a devastating loss for everyone at Tina's. Our hearts are with his family, friends, and all who knew and worked alongside him. We are cooperating fully with local authorities and Cal OSHA in the ongoing investigation, and our focus remains on honoring his life, supporting those who are grieving, and maintaining the highest safety standards in our facility." Detectives with the Vernon Police Department and Cal OSHA began a joint investigation to determine how the accident occurred. They confirmed that no foul play was suspected, but emphasized that the machine had not been properly deactivated before cleaning began, a tragic oversight that proved fatal. For the young worker's family, the loss was unbearable. Their son, barely out of high school, had gone to work one summer night hoping to earn a living, and never came home. Co-workers described him as a quiet, hardworking teen who took pride in his job and was always willing to help others. His death left the entire plant shaken. One employee told reporters that his cries for help echoed through the factory, a sound they would never forget. In the end, official reports reduced the unimaginable to a single, cold line. Employee cleaning machine falls into grinder and is killed. Behind those sterile words was the story of a 19-year-old whose life ended in seconds. A young man consumed by a machine built to process food, not people. His death became a haunting reminder that in industrial settings, one missed safety step can mean the difference between life and death. The Russian lathe accident remains one of the most chilling examples of just how dangerous industrial machinery can be. Lathes are critical in countless industries, from automotive manufacturing to furniture production, shaping metal, wood, and plastic with incredible precision. But that precision comes with a hidden cost, immense power paired with immense risk. One small mistake, one loose article of clothing, and an ordinary workday can instantly turn fatal. In the incident that shocked the industrial world, a worker approached a massive horizontal lathe, initially inspecting it with curiosity. Something seemed off, though at first he focused on the wrong detail. When his gaze shifted upward to the ceiling, he noticed a small leak dripping onto the machine. For a brief moment, relief washed over him. He thought he had figured out the problem. Stepping back to retrieve tools, he never imagined what was about to happen. In a split second, disaster struck. His sleeve became caught on the spinning cylinder. Before he could react, he was yanked into the lathe, slammed violently between the rotating steel and the machine's base, flung around like a rag doll. The lathe's relentless rotation tore through his body with horrifying speed. First, his shoes were flung off, then flesh, then limbs, until nothing recognizable remained. Moments later, a second worker arrived on the scene. He froze, utterly horrified at the devastation. Blood trails, shredded remains, and chaos everywhere. There was no time for rescue, no hope of survival. The factory cameras had captured the entire event, and footage circulated online before being quickly removed, shocking millions. Safety experts immediately highlighted the critical lessons. Never wear loose clothing near industrial machinery. Always secure hair and jewelry, and maintain a safe distance. Even beyond this tragedy, lathes carry numerous hazards. Flying debris, incorrect tool use, and improper machine settings can all cause severe injuries or death. Accidents like the Russian lathe incident underscore a larger systemic problem. Industries often underestimate the importance of proper worker training and adherence to safety protocols. Lathes are sometimes called the mother of all machines, and for good reason. Their power and versatility are unmatched, but that same power demands respect, understanding the machine, recognizing potential hazards, and using protective gear aren't optional. They're matters of survival. The aftermath of the Russian lathe accident was devastating both personally and industrially. Families and colleagues were left grappling with the sudden loss, while the incident sparked conversations across workplaces worldwide about heavy machinery safety. It became painfully clear. A single lapse, a loose sleeve, a brief distraction could have catastrophic consequences. In response, industries have taken steps to prevent similar tragedies. Comprehensive training programs now emphasize familiarity with machine operations, potential hazards, and proper safety procedures. Protective clothing designed to reduce the risk of entanglement has become standard, along with regular inspections and maintenance of equipment. Many workplaces have incorporated emergency shutoff mechanisms and automatic stop systems to minimize risk. This tragedy, and countless others like it, serves as a stark warning. Heavy machinery is not just powerful, it is unforgiving. One misstep, one ignored safety rule, and a life can be lost in seconds. The Russian lathe accident reminds workers and employers alike that safety must always come first. It's a lesson written in tragedy. Respect the machine, understand the risks, and never cut corners, because in environments like these, there is no room for error, and the consequences are absolute. Deep in the rugged hills of northern Myanmar lies Hpakant, a land famous for jade so valuable it fuels an entire shadow economy, and for tragedies so devastating they could silence a crowd. On July 2, 2020, this remote mining hub became the site of one of the deadliest mine disasters in history, the Hpakant jade mine landslide. It began like any other monsoon morning, with gray skies, thick fog, and miners scrambling over piles of discarded earth in search of leftover jade stones, the kind that could change a person's life overnight. But by noon, that dream quite literally crumbled. A massive slope of mining waste, soaked with rain and weakened by years of neglect, suddenly collapsed, unleashing a torrent of mud, rocks, and debris that swept through the valley with terrifying force. Within seconds, hundreds of miners were buried alive, their shouts drowned by the roar of the earth itself. The numbers were horrifying. Around 175 to 200 miners lost their lives that day, swallowed by the same land that had once promised them fortune. The victims were mostly freelance jade pickers, people who weren't employed by the big companies but scoured through the leftovers, hoping to find a gem or two. They stood on mountains of unstable waste rock, knowing the risks, but driven by the need to survive. When the hill collapsed, it sent a wave of sludge crashing down into a flooded pit, creating a deadly whirlpool of water and mud. Those close enough to see it described it as a wall of earth moving like the sea, and within minutes the pit became a mass grave. Rescue teams rushed in, but all they could find were helmets, sandals, and flashes of the green stones that had caused so much suffering. The tragedy did not come out of nowhere. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The jade mining industry in Hpakant is worth billions, but most of its profits never reach the miners themselves. Instead, the area is a chaotic patchwork of unregulated sites, enormous waste heaps, and dangerous working conditions. Companies dig deep, dump the leftover rubble into massive piles, and move on, leaving locals to pick through the remains. Add in the heavy monsoon rains, poor safety measures, and lack of government oversight, and you have a recipe for catastrophe. In fact, landslides in Hpakant are so common that locals have a grim saying, "When it rains, the mountains eat men." Sadly, the 2020 landslide proved just how literal that could be. After the disaster, rescue workers pulled out more than 160 bodies, while dozens more remained missing. The Myanmar Fire Service Department posted grim updates on Facebook as photos of the muddy devastation spread across the internet. Families gathered at the site, waiting for news that never came. Officials called it one of the worst mining accidents the country had ever seen. But for the people of Hpakant, it was another reminder that their lives were considered expendable in the pursuit of jade, a stone prized in luxury markets across the world. The Hpakant disaster was not just about nature's fury, it was about human greed and neglect. Experts later found that the slope had been dangerously unstable long before it collapsed, weakened by reckless dumping and rainwater infiltration. Locals had even warned authorities about the risk, but little was done. The government promised tighter regulations afterward, but with the jade trade being so lucrative and politically entangled, real change has been slow. In the end, the Hpakant landslide became a haunting symbol of Myanmar's jade industry, a world where fortune and fatality coexist side by side. Beneath the gleam of every polished green gemstone lies a story of struggle, sacrifice, and sometimes tragedy. Those who died in the 2020 disaster were not just victims of a landslide, they were victims of a system that buried them long before the earth did. On February 9, 2019, Daniel Hill, a 54-year-old worker from South Lyon, Michigan, began what should have been another ordinary shift at Michigan Seamless Tube, a steel manufacturing company known for producing heavy-duty metal tubing. That day, Daniel was assigned one of the plant's most dangerous tasks, checking the acid tanks, enormous open vats filled with boiling sulfuric acid, heated to around 160 degrees. The acid solution, maintained at a concentration of roughly 10 to 12%, was used to strip rust and impurities from steel tubes before they were processed further. Daniel was relatively new to this part of the job, and the task required him to walk across a narrow, elevated platform that ran above the tanks. The air was thick with a sharp, chemical mist that burned the eyes, nose, and throat. The metal grating beneath his boots was slick with condensation. Just after 12:20 p.m., something went terribly wrong. Daniel slipped and fell directly into one of the acid vats. Two of his co-workers immediately rushed to the scene, fighting through the fumes to pull him out of the scalding liquid. Within moments, they managed to drag him free, but the damage was already catastrophic. The acid had eaten through his clothing instantly, burning deep into his skin and muscle tissue. Witnesses later said it was one of the most horrifying things they had ever seen. Panicked workers dragged Daniel beneath an emergency safety shower, desperately trying to rinse away the acid as he screamed in unimaginable pain. But the chemical reaction was unstoppable. The acid had already soaked through much of his body, leaving his skin peeling and raw. Despite his agony, Daniel remained conscious as his co-workers tried to help him. When the South Lyon Fire Department arrived, they quickly transported him to the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. According to Fire Chief Robert Vogel, Daniel endured some of the worst pain imaginable. Doctors did everything they could, but the acid had penetrated too deeply, burning through his skin, muscle, and tissue from the inside out. For nearly 11 excruciating hours, Daniel clung to life, suffering injuries that covered almost his entire body. At 11:30 that night, he finally succumbed to his wounds. Michigan Seamless Tube later released a statement expressing condolences. A valued Michigan Seamless Tube employee was involved in a serious industrial accident on Saturday afternoon. The employee was taken to the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. He did not survive his injuries and passed away at the hospital. The company is conducting a comprehensive investigation and is cooperating fully with the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Investigators from MIOSHA, the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration, later confirmed that Daniel had been checking the acid's concentration when he fell. Their report, chilling in its simplicity, summarized the event in a single sterile line. Employee falls into tank of sulfuric acid and is killed. Months later, state regulators fined Michigan Seamless Tube $2,500 for safety violations. They found that the acid tanks lacked proper guardrails and anti-slip measures, and that workers were not adequately trained for the hazards of working around open vats of acid. Daniel Hill left behind a loving family, children and grandchildren, people whose lives were shattered by one tragic moment. His death was described as slow and agonizing, the result of a preventable accident in a workplace that underestimated its risks. It stands as a grim reminder that in industrial settings, even a single oversight can turn a routine task into a nightmare, and that every safety measure ignored can cost a life. It was a typical afternoon at New B, a plastic recycling factory in the Saint Laurent borough of Montreal. The machines churned endlessly, crushing and shaping plastic with relentless force. For workers, the rhythm of the rollers was just part of the day. Clock in, keep the line moving, clock out, repeat. But on August 8, 2016, that rhythm was shattered forever. Around 12:15 p.m., a 56-year-old employee spotted a strip of plastic jammed in the rollers. Determined to keep production running, he climbed a 1.2-meter ladder to reach the obstruction. What seemed like a simple, routine task turned catastrophic in seconds. His hand became trapped between the two massive rollers, and before anyone could react, his entire arm, and eventually his torso, was pulled into the unforgiving machinery. The space between the rollers was just 12 centimeters, yet it was enough to trap his body completely. Co-workers scrambled. One pressed the emergency stop button while others tried desperately to free him. Ambulance workers arrived quickly, and the man was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Despite their efforts, his injuries were too severe. He tragically succumbed to the crushing force of the rollers shortly after arriving. The incident shocked employees and highlighted just how dangerous industrial work can be, even during tasks that seem simple. Factories like New B rely on machines that can crush, shred, and mold materials with incredible power. But that same power leaves little room for error. One misstep, one moment of distraction, and a routine day can become a fatal one. NEST, Quebec's Workplace Health and Safety Board, began an investigation to determine the exact circumstances. New B pledged full cooperation, acknowledging the tragedy while emphasizing their commitment to safety. But for those who witnessed the accident, and for the worker's family, the damage had already been done. The event served as a stark reminder that even the most ordinary tasks in industrial workplaces carry life or death stakes. The roller incident is far from unique. Across the world, industrial accidents like this happen every day, from lathes in Russian factories to sawmills in East Texas and molten iron vats in Illinois. Each story shares a common thread: machines with immense power, workers trying to complete their tasks, and a split-second miscalculation that turns fatal. Safety is not just a guideline, it's survival. In factories, even a small misstep, a loose sleeve, or a moment of distraction can have catastrophic consequences. Industrial machines may shape our world, but they do so with no mercy. The New B tragedy reminds us that behind every product, there's a human life at risk, working tirelessly to keep the line moving. Incidents like this have led industries to focus more on safety protocols, training programs, and protective equipment. Workers are now being taught to respect the power of machines, wear proper clothing, and recognize hazards before they become deadly. Emergency stop buttons, regular inspections, and advanced safety features are being emphasized to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Yet, despite all precautions, industrial work will always carry risk. The story of the New B roller incident is a sobering reminder that life can be here one second and gone the next. It calls on all of us to value safety, respect the machines, and never underestimate the power behind the equipment that shapes the modern world. For workers, it's a daily reality. For the rest of us, it's a wake-up call. One wrong move, and a life can be lost in an instant.